Hello, everybody, and welcome to SkyWatch Television. Today, in part, is a major celebration. We have a major announcement to make. Ladies and gentlemen, after 3 years in production and a series of delays and challenges that we're going to talk about just a little bit today in this week's program, ladies and gentlemen, the Rescue Us 6 DVD docu-series is complete. This series was wrought, Derek, with some of the heaviest spiritual warfare in the history of Defender investigative films, or frankly, SkyWatch Television, or even Defender Publishing. And we're going to talk about a little bit of that. But before we get into what is this series, Rescue Us, who are we rescuing? What does this mean? Let me read you the subtitle, and then I'm going to introduce who's in-house. Rescue Us, waging war on a malevolent industry that is systematically destroying innocence. Here to help me discuss what this series is all about, he's the host of SkyWatch TV's 5 and 10, Derek Gilbert. She's the survivor of one of the most extreme cases of child abuse in Missouri state history. A child advocate now and featured in the Rescue Us series, Samantha Orr. She's the lead director of the Rescue Us docu-series, Brittany Jackson. Also featured in the Rescue Us series, she's the visionary and founder of Whispering Ponies Ranch, Nita Horn. And at times playing the role of Samantha Orr's mother, she's the host of the Simply His Coffee Shop. Please welcome my beautiful wife, Catherine Horn. So what is Rescue Us? Well, very generically, it is a 6.5-hour series that resides on 6 DVDs, and it'll also be available to stream immediately, and I'll tell you about that in just a few minutes. But ladies and gentlemen, this series has become the series of epic legend around here. The people that know me have gotten tired of hearing me say, it's coming. I promise it's coming. And again, there's no time in a short form episode like this of SkyWatch Television, Brittany, that's going to do justice to trying to unpack the complexity and the terrain that this 6.5-hour series covers. But very quickly, I will just collapse generically to say that it is a series that exposes the multitude of ways that we are losing an entire generation of young people. From the public schools trying to normalize critical race theory, those in power trying to normalize things like pedophilia, sexual activity between minor and adult, reclassifying them as MAPs, minor attracted persons trying to normalize the idea that adults can interact with children in a way that they were never intended to by Father God. Mass shootings, the fact that this is politicized, but there are never any armed guards put in place to protect our federal school buildings. You have children coming up missing every day at the open border. Derek, the 322,000 children they've recently admitted to over just the last 3.5 years, many of them forced into sexual prostitution. We are losing an entire generation of young people. Mm-hmm. And the dark forces out there that are seeing to this are absolutely elated. They are trembling with delight every time a life of promise is snuffed out before it begins. Unfortunately, the comatose church is mostly either unaware or completely not engaged in this conversation at all. So yes, that is what this 6.5-hour series illuminates. But ladies and gentlemen, it also does something that no other series that we're aware of ever, Brittany. No matter where you go online and you find these documentaries on things that just talk about one aspect of this, let's say sex trafficking, right?
Right.
Forced prostitution. You might find a documentary that does a really good job illuminating one aspect of this massive crisis, but it doesn't give the viewer any tangible steps as to how to go about doing something about it next.
Right.
Yeah.
So you'll put out a film, it'll pull on the heartstrings of people, they'll go back to their normal jobs, and after a few days of empathy, nothing is done.
Right.
That's why Rescue Us is different. The last 3 episodes of this series pivots from all of the darkness, now that we've covered everything from the occult, to what's happening in the foster care system. We switch gears, Derek, and we get into what the body of Christ, I don't care if you're someone on a pension with limited income.
Right.
I don't care if you're a person of means or have land. We talk in detail about what can be done,
Right.
leaving the viewer with no excuse after they finish the series for not standing in the gap for these helpless children who, without you, have no champion here in this plane of existence to stand up for them. So, ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment, we're going to come back from a very short excerpt from the series that I want you to watch, and we're going to talk as a panel some more about the Rescue Us series. But first, watch this. There is an all-out war being waged on the minds of an entire generation of today's young people.
State lawmakers are now questioning how 70 foster kids can go missing.
They have convinced us in the West that children are a burden. Birth rates are below replacement levels just about everywhere in the Northern Hemisphere.
People would have to be utterly blind or insane not to recognize the current heartbreaking onslaught against our most vulnerable citizens, our children.
Children who have been thrown up against walls and locked in closets. Children who hide under their beds in fear and whose nightmares are real. Children who have been beaten with 2x4s, whipped with bicycle chains, and burned with cigarette butts.
Children living in foster care are 4 to 5 times more likely to commit suicide than those who are not.
An agenda to submit our current generation of children to a fate far worse than death is being carried out.
I was 5 years old. I was doing dishes. My mom was so mad. She had picked up one of the steak knives and shoved it through my hand and just walked away.
Who will stand in the gap for these children? These are real lives. I know that some of what is in this series is very difficult, ladies and gentlemen, but we have a responsibility. Mm-hmm. Believe me when I tell you, there's going to be some very difficult parts of this series to watch when you watch the Rescue Us series. But be heartened, because there's a lot of hope in the second half of the series. I tell people, if it's your first time watching the series, if you can make it to episode 4, you'll have moments of elation, hope, triumph, victory as you see the body of Christ intervening for the very children that this series is focused on. You're going to see God intervene at work in their lives, and you're going to see lives transform. Right. But ladies and gentlemen, here on panel, Mom, my beautiful wife, Catherine, Brittany, Samantha, Derek, we recently watched this privately in a family viewing, and I got to tell you, there were no dry eyes, were there, Brittany?
No. Like Joe said, the first 3 episodes are very hard to get through, but you have to understand the problem before you can get to the solution.
That's right. And some of it, of course, for us was just difficult emotionally, Derek, because it also features a lot of excerpts of my father, who passed away in the middle of the production of this series, which was one of the big, giant detriments of carrying it over the finish line. Thankfully, by the grace of God, we got all of his parts shot.
Right.
Yeah. So we weren't missing anything for the series, but just emotionally. The second half of this series showcases much of what his legacy was at the time. You see him on tractors driving these children down to the pond to go fishing and ministering to the very children that we're talking about in this series, who are victims of the foster care system and more. But Brittany, very quickly, we've never seen anything like the spiritual warfare that came against this project. There was a period of the middle of this, Derek, you recall, some of this is very personal, and we're not going to exfoliate this on television, but the series was in real jeopardy of not getting finished at all.
Right. Yeah, being somewhat familiar with the video editing process and being intimately familiar with the software you're using, some of the problems you guys are running into, just complete bafflement.
Yes.
Yeah, software
This shouldn't be possible, and yet it is happening. So I'm crediting principalities, powers, and cosmic rulers over this present darkness.
Well, absolutely. But then also you have to give God credit for coming in sometimes at the very last second and rescue us.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll just give you a couple of examples. So my father, he sits down, he does his entire interview that is now spread out through all 6 parts of the episode. Something flickers with the power, and we lose the entire bit of audio. So you've got 4 hours of his face talking, but no audio. Well, by the grace of God, Dakota Jackson, Brittany's husband, was able to go online and download some forensic program that reinstitutes or constitutes broken wave files, and he's pulled it back in and brings compression, and suddenly he was able to reactivate my dad's vocals.
Wow.
Nita's interview, the entire thing got completely hosed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something happened during export that put something almost like face masking, a broken bit of her face. It almost looked like she had something physically wrong with her face.
And the lighting was messed
Yeah, the
up.
lighting was messed up. None of this came out in proofing, so we ended up having to reshoot all of her parts.
Yeah.
There would be these exports where we would wait 8 hours for an export on one of the episodes, and then we compress it, and I'm proofing, and I had to proof it with my eyes wide open because one frame would go green on the same computer that's exporting other projects successfully. But then as soon as you would load Rescue Us, the library is broken. The software that opens the project file is totally busted over and over and over again. And the other thing is, as we've dripped over the last 3 years, trailers, they've been demonetized, they've been deplatformed. One of them hadn't even been released yet. Brittany uploaded it to our SkyWatch Television YouTube for release, and the algorithm detected something having to do with foster care, the government, sex trafficking, and lo and behold, we came into yet our most recent installation of having lost all of
Losing
our
track.
YouTube. They completely deleted our channel, and when we appealed to them for an explanation, it was just once again gone against their terms and policies. And I'm like, how does showcasing broken-hearted children receiving therapy at a therapeutic ranch with therapeutic animals constitute as breaking their terms and policies? But I digress. So here in a minute, we're going to explain to you some of the ways that you can be a part of a grassroots movement to get this information out there. But first, we want to show you another excerpt from the Rescue Us series. Watch this.
Hi, my name's Wayne Tesh, and I'm a co-founder of Royal Family Kids, a camp designed specifically for children in the foster care system. Children who have been thrown up against walls and locked in closets. Children who hide under their beds in fear and whose nightmares are real. Children who have been beaten with 2x4s, whipped with bicycle chains, and burned with cigarette butts. The statistics of foster care is overwhelming.
What if I told you that as we're sitting here right now, that more than 420,000 small children and young people are already in the foster care system? Would you be shocked to learn that 90% of these children are statistically guaranteed to experience severe trauma in every possible way that you can imagine during their time in the system? What if you learned that only 50% of these precious souls will ever reunite with their biological families or see loved ones or even familiar faces ever again? Given such traumatic circumstances, such a sense of abandonment and worldview-shattering hopelessness, would it then actually surprise you to learn that children living in foster care are 4 to 5 times more likely to commit suicide than those who are not? And so far, we're only talking about those children who are still actively living in the system. As for the more than 23,000 young adults who age out of the program every year, over 80% of these young men will become incarcerated. And over 70% of the young women will be pregnant before the age of 21. With children who are statistically destined for placement in the foster care system themselves. Almost half of these casualties of a failed culture will be homeless within less than 2 years, and over 95% of them now living outside of foster care with no proper preparations or coping skills for the outside world will immediately fall into systemic poverty. So how do so many young people end up in this situation in the first place? Well, tons of reasons. Parental abandonment, death, incarceration, some are even runaways, but overwhelmingly, children who are placed into foster care are the victims of either severe abuse and/or neglect perpetrated by their parents or guardians. Now, how can this be happening in America, you might ask, when so many people here seem to be generally good-hearted, even charitable? I mean, isn't someone out there with the means to do something about this, aware of this crisis, and equipped to confront it head-on? Maybe some benevolent agency within the government that can help? Well, while foster care system exists to help answer some of these questions and more, unfortunately, it is a system that in and of itself is completely overburdened and has far too many blind spots. Many law enforcement agencies and social workers don't have the resources at all to take on the overwhelming challenge of coordinating adequate or even timely investigations into the deaths or disappearances of children missing from child welfare agencies. And further, caseworkers don't always file missing persons reports when a foster child disappears. Privacy laws keep details of children's deaths or whereabouts a secret, and computer and medical problems can thwart police and medical examiners who are working on missing child cases. Now, you add to that, federal accounting kept on children who die while missing in state custody is scarce to non-existent, and you end up with just a small snapshot of how so many of these young victims are abused in every way imaginable, why they disappear, and are often never heard from again.
Each child in foster care has probably had at least 6 placements. And by a placement, I mean they went from foster home to foster home to foster home. 6 different placements. Let me give an illustration of what that's like. My daughter wanted to grow a garden. She was like 6 years old. And in our backyard in California, we planted corn and carrots and cucumbers and tomatoes, and she was looking forward to it. And I'll never forget her sitting around the table, and she said, "Dad, the carrots aren't growing." And I said, "What do you mean the carrots aren't growing?" She said, "Every time I come home from school, I go to the backyard and I pull up the carrot to see if it's grown, and it hasn't, so I stick it back into the ground again." We know what that means. That means death for the carrot. But when you have kids who move from home to home, being pulled up, placed in another home, pulled out of that one and placed in another, the average is 6 homes. And it's difficult for children to have a normal upbringing when they're moving from place to place, and every place they go into, there's different rules.
It was a story that horrified the nation, the 13 Turpin children suffering years of abuse at the hands of their own parents. Their parents pleaded guilty to torture, child abuse, and false imprisonment, sentenced to life in prison. 6 of those children alleging they suffered physical and emotional abuse, with 5 of them alleging sexual abuse in the foster home they were placed in after their rescue. The lawsuits, which uses pseudonyms, allege the foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. O, had a prior history of abusing and neglecting children placed in their care. The suit says the children were, among other things, sexually abused, hit with a belt, endured threats that they would be returned to their biological parents, told they were worthless and should commit suicide, and even forced to eat their own vomit.
One of the shocking things that has gripped me is sex trafficking. And when I realized, according to an FBI report, that over 50% of the children caught in sex trafficking come from foster care, that was a startling statistic that gripped my heart. Nobody knows about these kids. They've been moved from place to place to place, and then just disappear in the sex trade industry. And nobody knows who they are.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we need the grassroots support of our SkyWatchTV family to help us get the Rescue Us series out to as many people as we possibly can. This information is being suppressed, deleted, deplatformed, taken down, and is way too sobering for most network television outlets. We need you to get involved. We need you to join us in the efforts to get this series in front of your friends, your pastors, people of influence in government, your communities, anybody and everybody. Help us share this series not only to illuminate the many, many ways that we're losing an entire generation of children to intolerable darkness, but also to assist in the raising of an army of God's people willing to stand in the gap for them. The Rescue Us series shows the viewer what can be done by absolutely anybody willing to say, "Yes, Lord, I will answer the call. I will intervene for those who have no voice and for those who desperately need help." And that's why right now we're asking you to stand with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we're proud to introduce the Rescue Us special offer. For your donation of only $49.99, you'll not only receive a copy of the entire 6-DVD docu-series Rescue Us that uncovers the massive crisis destroying an entire generation of youth, all while challenging each one of us to rise up for our nation's most vulnerable and break the cycle of abuse. But you'll also receive the brand new documentary, Rescued, Samantha's Story, where Samantha Orr personally takes you through her nightmarish childhood of unthinkable trauma and abuse to her total restoration in the arms of Jesus Christ. But friends, that's not all. Right now, while supplies last, we're also including in this special opportunity the 4-hour audio series on disc, The Hidden Occultism of Epstein's Orgy Island by the late Dr. Thomas Horn, Silent Cry, The Darker Side of Trafficking featuring Yaku Bouillons, Ilanka Deaton, Dr. Thomas Horn, and others, and the major motion picture movie Camp on DVD that showcases what God can do in the life of a child desperate in need of rescuing through ministries like Royal Family Kids and is inspired by true events. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of $200. Yours now for your donation of only $49.99, which includes free shipping to all U.S. orders. But ladies and gentlemen, we are so committed to this message reaching as many viewers as is humanly possible that we want to equip you, our grassroots army of SkyWatchTV friends and family members, with an opportunity to partner with us like never before. Join us in spreading this invaluable message through the Rescue Us Partner Pack, where you'll receive 5 copies of each of the items we just mentioned for your donation of only $165. That's right, when you order the special Rescue Us Partner Pack, you'll receive 5 copies of the entire 6-DVD docu-series Rescue Us, 5 copies of Rescued, Samantha's Story, 5 copies of The Hidden Occultism of Epstein's Orgy Island, 5 copies of Silent Cry, The Darker Side of Trafficking, and 5 copies of the major motion picture movie Camp on DVD. This massive collection of documentaries, audio series, and movies holds a retail value of $1,000. Yours now for your donation of only $165. With 5 complete copies of everything in the collection, that allows you to keep 1 for you and your family and 4 entire sets to share with people that you believe will also be inspired to stand up in defense of God's greatest gift to us, our children. Remember, your donation helps SkyWatchTV continue to get this important message to the 4 corners of the world. You can also stream the entire Rescue Us series and or Samantha's Story right now at skywatchtvstore.com/stream. So act quickly. You can scan the QR code on your screen using the camera app on your phone for instant access to this special opportunity. Visit us at skywatchtvstore.com or call 1-844-750-4985 and ask for the Rescue Us special offer or the Rescue Us Partner Pack right now. Rescue Us, waging war on a malevolent industry that is systematically destroying innocence. Ladies and gentlemen, you can partner with us to help us get this message out to the four corners of the earth, raise awareness for these poor children who have no voice and no defender outside of God the Father in the spiritual realm. They need help here.
You know, Wayne says something about kids being pulled from home to home to home, and whenever I was younger, my family actually did foster care, and we had a little girl in our home who had been to 7 foster homes by the time she was 4 years old.
Wow.
And, you know, my background is in education. I've substituted, I've done some student teaching things, and you see these kids who, from the outside, just might seem like a kid with a normal kid or a kid with just behavior issues. You know,
Right.
they're the troubled kid, but
Right.
how can you expect a kid to be well behaved, well mannered when they've been pulled from home to home to home?
Yeah.
Exactly.
They have no family, no father figure, no mother figure to guide them.
Right.
Right.
And that's what the series brings awareness to.
Well, it does a lot more than that. And I just want to say on behalf of Brittany, she's not going to tell you this. She literally killed herself for this series. I mean that. That Brittany rescue us. I mean, when we were having some of the most difficult moments bringing this series to fruition, the ideas, the times where we sat and looked at footage and just, how are we going to tell this story? And then, of course, Brittany, you personally helped button up all of the Samantha story footage and created this DVD. And I don't have time in this episode to do justice to how hard Brittany worked.
Yeah.
She was sleeping this. She was eating it. She was daydreaming it.
Yeah.
She got very, very, very tired at different points, but she never gave up. She absolutely persevered because this was very personal to you.
Yes.
You understand how the foster care system works, and as an educator, you've seen these children that we're talking about, and you've seen what we do at Whispering Ponies Ranch to stand in the gap for these children. Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to put a bookmark in this conversation today, but next week we're going to be taking a look at some of the excerpts of the Rescue Us series that actually showcase the life of my mother, Nita Horn, and also the late Dr. Thomas Horn. One of the focuses of episode 4 of the series really is what I like to kind of call the true Hollywood-esque look at them as very young people. And when I say young people, I mean very young people, as children, both of them.
Yeah.
We set them down and we said, go back as far into your life as you can remember anything and start there.
Right.
So they both started talking about their childhood. There is a hilarious story that you're going to see in the series where my dad is trying to impress my mom on their first date, and he runs a horse chest deep in the mud and ruins their date. And she talks about what it was like to be a pastor's wife in the 80s and 70s, going back to the 70s when big tent revivals. Derek, remember that, when that was a thing, man. Pre the internet, big tent revivals was how stuff went viral. So in this series, you're going to get to see behind the curtain, meet the Horn family like you've never been able to see them before. Don't miss it. We're going to be back next week to continue this discussion. I'm Joe Artis Horn. Keep your eyes on the prize, which is Jesus Christ. We'll be back.